Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon session on Thursday. We've got 3 more lightning talks for you. We've got, first of all, Anne Smith of Huddersfield is going to talk about her experiences teaching a course with students spread all around the world. Then Monica Van Dieren with her experiences turning to web work. And then finally, something from Mariana Bonanomi and Andrew Parker talking about content development using web work. Okay, so I think we'll get straight into it. Remember, you can submit questions through the Moodle site. Chris has just put the link to that in the chat, and we'll get going.
Hello, I'm Anne Smith from the University of Huddersfield, and I'm hoping to share today a brief outline of my numbers experience. Before the pandemic, I've been steadily building a numbers portfolio for a variety of talk modules and had put together some recruitment activities for use with students and their families when they were on campus. However, after celebrating Chinese New Year in January, as I was gathering the documents together for my visa application, it became increasingly apparent that I wouldn't be making a trip to China for teaching in the beginning of March. However, the teaching would still go ahead, and I had to find a means without a VLE of remotely distributing material teaching students who in turn were studying remotely from their university. Little did I know that I'd be facing a similar situation at Huddersfield 2 months later. Luckily, I'd taught at Fuzhou in the southeast of China previously, and so I was aware what media was and wasn't available. YouTube, for example, Google-based products and BBC Bite Size for making presentations, for example, I couldn't use any of those items. Thankfully, though, I could use Numbers and MathTutor, including the MathTutor videos. So I set to work putting together material, 40 credits worth in 2 blocks. I did a README style file, like a web page with signposted, timelined links to lecture notes, handwritten exercises, Helm information and exercises, and MathTutor links and numbers exercises. This was pre the Numbers handy link facility, so I had to download each numbers question as a standalone and then extract the index files. I zipped the whole thing up and emailed it to the TA in China, who distributed it to all the students spread across the country. And there was nothing but quiet for a very long time. So, how did it go? Well, the Chinese system uses, or China uses, a 3-point assessment model, the performance score, which was last year done by discussion with the students individually, so enhancing their English exposure, a mid-term assessment and a final exam. Now, although these students, a cohort of 100, are mostly electronic and communication students, although they're foundation students, their mathematical ability is generally excellent. However, their English isn't, and there are all the problems of studying in a second language. And as I say, whereas in 2019 I could encourage group practice, discussions, dictionary building, presentations, this year that wasn't going to be possible. All the teaching and assessment is in English. That's part of the assessment process, because we want to ensure that the students have sufficient English understanding, comprehension, writing, discussion, etc., to be able to come and study in the UK in future years. applications of any subject are usually tricky for first language students. And there's often lengthy passages describing various groupings for illustration, for example, on a Venn diagram. And I was a little concerned about this, so I set up the question and gave a pre-matching exercise to check that the students could understand the passage. However, I overlooked the possibility of misunderstanding the actual question and getting the input wrong in terms of my numbers question. I'd asked for them to, first of all, input expressions in X for each of the different regions. So any students who input numerical values rather than expressions in X were marked wrong because of the way I set the numbers question up. This was manually corrected, but it was no doubt frustrating for the students at the time. However, we now have a solution in the numbers 5 version where we can add an alternative answer, and I've been through and I've done that for this particular question and given partial marks for each of the numerical answers en route to the final solution. As the students were coming close to their end of module exam, it became increasingly apparent that they wouldn't be able to sit that on campus as we had hoped. And so I was concerned again about input practice, and I devised a numbers entry practice question. By this point, perhaps the UK were already in lockdown, but either way, the numbers feature of being able to share the link to an exercise had been incorporated in the package, and so I didn't have to download and extract and link to the index file this time. This was nice and straightforward. So a feature that I'm using quite a lot and very much appreciate in numbers. Feedback-wise, well, 100 students all have passed the block 1 material. I don't know yet about block 2, but they've all seemed to be doing very well at the moment. 6 assessments have been taken. Very few queries about the assessments, 3 individual queries about, or 3 individual categories, very few students asking. Accuracy of input, how many decimal places, the algebraic input, slightly concerned that they'd put in algebraic expressions and been marked wrong because they hadn't used the correct input, and mark allocation, not getting marks for working out, just on the final answer. So I would say all in all, well, it feels as though it was very successful. It certainly gave me the confidence to move ahead and press to holding the Year 1 Engineering Mathematics module at Huddersfield online. Previously, just to explain, I have incorporated numbers material within the learning resources for this module. Every topic will have a walkthrough type question which takes them through step by step, introducing topics, randomised questions for consolidation and revision purposes. But all these exercises, all these numbers questions have been for formative purposes. Having decided that I would try and move the exam online, I felt that I needed to teach the students not just how to do particular techniques in the engineering maths, but also how to work through the process and to give them as much support in that as possible. So 1 month prior to the exam, when I got all the documentation sorted and I'd been given the go-ahead, I set up a test area, in a test assessment area for them on the Brightspace VLE. I used the numbers entry practice that I developed for the China students, And I could also post them a video of how to access the online exam, how to move around in the exam, etc., and how to submit the transcript. I put a practice exam up that they could access, and the randomly generated questions, they could repeat the practice exam, the practice questions within it as many times as they wanted. I also put an exam test submission box, a Turnitin submission box, so that they could practice the entire process of the submission. Ultimately, even though I did post a reminder including all the links 8 days before the exam, only 5 students took advantage of the full practice process. But be that as it may, they must have felt confident enough, I assume. How did it go? Well, for the vast majority of the students, they made no contact with me. I can only assume there were no apparent issues. The marks came through. I haven't fully explained yet, but what I did was I set up the Turnitin box, and I didn't tell the students that there would hopefully be an automatic update of the mark, because I didn't want them to rely on that update in case it didn't come through. So I asked for them to submit their results summary sheets to the Turnitin box. The vast majority had both a submission to Turnitin and a grade recorded on the spreadsheet, the grade centre on our VLE. 6 students had a 0 mark recorded, but had posted their results showing the summary, and I accepted those given marks and updated their 0 marks that were initially awarded. 2 students, as far as I could see, hadn't accessed the exam, but had sent handwritten solutions without the questions written down via email, and I didn't accept these, and I've passed these to the exam board. A number of students were concerned or complained, we might say, about being marked by a computer and that they'd lost method marks. I had about 13, maybe 40 emails in total, but some of them were repeated emails from a particular particular student, sorry. What about me? What did I think of the process? Well, it was a low stakes exam, year 1. I already had 2 marks for 2 in-class tests sat under exam conditions, so I did have some benchmark information. All the exam marks went up. Not surprisingly, it's quite a high scoring exam. Had I planned an end of module assessment, then I would most certainly have incorporated continuous assessment at the end of say a block, a topic block or whatever, for a practice for both myself and for students. I think I could have easily used some of the material that was already there for formative purposes. It was incredibly stressful. It really was stressful. I had no idea how it might go. But all in all, well, apart from saying a massive thank you to the numbers team at Newcastle, to Chris and Chris, who were invaluable both with the technical support, running their online tutorial sessions, adding to the blog posts and reassuring us. I would say that overall, the exam they had in numbers was very similar in difficulty to the exam that I would have given them on paper. The major difference is perhaps that I could incorporate more graphical explanation and ask more structured questions. So perhaps from that point of view, I did break the questions down quite a lot, and so that made the exam a little easier. Would I do it again? Well, yes, absolutely. Going forwards, I'm already trying to play with some of the new features that have come out on Numbers 5, and I've set up an asynchronous lesson plan with text exposition, some scaffolded numbers examples, some screencasts embedded and so on and so forth. I'm just practicing at the moment, and these might be better set up as separate links within our VLE, but for the time being I'm just trying to get used to the new features and trying to be a bit more adventurous.
So thank you, Anne, for that talk. It seems that I'm the only person who's written a question, so I'll just ask it. I'll make sure I can unmute you first of all. So what I wanted to know was, you said quite early on in the talk that you didn't have many queries from the students about the numbers assessments. I just wondered if that's something about the numbers assessments, or they just not communicate with you very much for other forms of assessment.
Did you mean the students from the students in China?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I think it might be a cultural difference, and I think they just are more used to doing autonomous working and just working out. Maybe they communicate with each other, but they were actually situated in their own homes, so they weren't in groups, in dormitory groups, so that they could communicate directly. Generally speaking, in China, they would have lectures, and then they would be given work, tutorial. They wouldn't have tutorial time. They would go away and they would just come and find the tutor if they had a problem with it. I think, to be honest, most of the maths that they cover on that foundation course, the actual maths content, is quite low level for them. There's only one or two little omission, partial fractions surprise them, one or two odd things, but they'll have done complex numbers. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I think it might be their independence, used to working independently.
Okay. Still no more questions from anyone else, so Debbie wants to make a comment. Can't imagine teaching remotely in another country where everything must be bundled and emailed ahead of time. Sounds like you did an incredible job. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It did feel a little surreal, I have to say.
So you had to bundle everything up ahead of time.
Yeah. I worked at Fusor last year. I went over and I stayed for a month, then I came back for a short break, then I went back for another month. So I taught each of these two parts in a 4-week block. It would normally be either a 12-week course for each of them. Mm-hmm. So when I was actually teaching there, I did know the TA, I didn't know the teaching assistant. He was the same one who I was working with the previous year. There were some steep learning curves. Number one, if I release the exercises prior to the class, which is our custom here, then I would have quite a large group of students sitting there waiting for me to tell them what we were going to do today, whereas I was thinking of picking up. So that's a sort of a lecturer's heaven side of it, I suppose. But it was just a completely different experience, but it gave me an opportunity to focus on the discussion, on writing presentations, on expanding, English, and they all ended up being able to speak maths with a Yorkshire accent. Most of their social accents came from either America or the Avengers, and then of course they have their own.
Right. I have one last question, I think, and then we'll move on. Mariana, who's speaking at the end of this session, says, what was the grade breakdown of the assessments? And did you count both written work along with the assessment scores?
Yeah, the grade breakdown, I assume we're talking in China with the 3-point assessment. China have an insistence that their end of module exam has to be a minimum 70%. So the end of module exam is 70%. We had hoped that students would come back in before they took that, and they're still hanging on to the block 2 exam in case they are able to take that under either proctored or supervised situations. The midterm assessment was 15%, sorry, and the written, more descriptive assignment, the performance score was 15% as well. Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Well, thank you, Anne. And now we will move on to our next talk, which is Monica van Dieren talking about her experiences moving to web work.
Hi, I'm Monica van Dieren from Robert Morris University outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the United States. And I'll be discussing how I used web work to transition a traditional on-ground course online. So some context, Robert Morris University is a mid-sized university, and all courses in mid-March were transitioned online due to the pandemic. This presentation will focus on 2 multivariable calculus courses that were taught online. When we were asked to move everything online, we had 2 days to figure it out, and many of us had never taught online before. I was flooded with information, actually, of all of the different tools and software packages out there that could engage students in a remote environment. But I didn't want the students to be overwhelmed with learning too many new software packages and platforms. And I had the students already using WebWork in class minimally, and I had a small experience using WebWork. So I decided to use that as a starting point, and we figured out how to put as much of our course online using WebWork as possible. If you're not familiar, WebWork is an open source online homework system for mathematics, but it also covers some other disciplines as well. It has an open problem library of over 30,000 questions and is used by over 1,000 universities and schools worldwide. There are many features of WebWork. I'll only be discussing a few of them today and how I use them maybe in a non-traditional way to create an engaging, interactive environment for my students. Traditionally, I've taught multivariable calculus on ground for over 10 years and have incorporated several formative and summative assessment tools in class, some of these online and some of them on ground, in paper, in fact. So a traditional course would start with a lecture, a pretty short one usually, and then there'll be a comprehension check of the students after that lecture where I hand them a Post-it note and ask them to put their response on that Post-it note. Sometimes it would be open-ended questions and sometimes it would be multiple choice. That would give me some idea of what the students were struggling with that day. Additionally, students completed online homework, but as many of you have experienced with online homework, students can get perfect scores on that, but still not really understand the material. So to get a sense of the students' understanding, I looked at their performance in class doing group work. Additionally, we had weekly computer labs where I guided the students through interactive lessons using CalcPlot 3D. These problems were actually all in WebWork, but they were things that we did in class because they were conceptually more difficult that the students couldn't complete them on their own at home without some additional guidance. And finally, we had the traditional pen and paper, closed book, timed exams that you would see in a typical calculus class. So moving these things online, the first thing I had to do is figure out how to get my lectures online, and obviously we would video them. So I had all of these video files, and what I found is that I could easily embed them using one line of code with the iframe embedding into any existing WebWork problem, or I could create my own WebWork problems. And with that one line, all I had to do was copy and paste my URL from the Google Drive that held my video. And then when the student opened up WebWork, they would see my video of the lecture there that they could play, and then they could answer their comprehension question, which would replace the Post-it notes. What was nice about this is I got some additional benefits that I didn't think about ahead of time, and that I could randomize the questions. The students would get automatic feedback. They didn't have to wait till the next class. And I could also, by tweaking the answer checker in WebWork using the one of answer checker instead of the multiple choice answer checker, I could ask open-ended Likert, I'm sorry, not open-ended, closed-ended Likert survey questions that didn't have a right or a wrong answer. Students could strongly agree or strongly disagree and it wouldn't get counted wrong. Additionally, I set up these video assignments using the just-in-time homework system in WebWork so that students would watch a video and answer a question, and if they got the problem wrong, it would open up a new problem that contained another video where we walked through the solution to that question before the student could proceed on to the next topic. Additionally, I used essay questions quite a bit in web work, not just in the traditional way where we'd ask open-ended question, for instance, having students justify their answer to a closed-ended true-false multiple choice problem, but also I would use it to replace these Post-it notes again. I would ask the students things like, what about this topic is still unclear? And then they would respond. And in web work, there is a nice grading feature where you can get all of the student responses to one question appearing on the same screen, and you can grade that question student by student, and additionally provide them feedback, quickly give them credit, or assign them multiple choice. Now, I found that some students weren't responding to email or even reading the email in this online environment, but they were checking their grades. So this gave me a way to communicate with the students, to let them know where they might be missing a particular topic, or even if they were missing an assignment they needed to go back, I would put that in the feedback box in the essays. But other ways that I use the essays were a little non-conventional. In particular, I realized that the students didn't just have to write a paragraph into these essay boxes, they could copy and paste URLs. And this gave me the ability to assess student work and understanding. They could take photos of the pen and paper work that they were completing and store it in Google Drive, and then put that URL into an essay box here, and I could grade those one by one in the essay grading system by just copying and pasting those URLs into a new window and giving comments to the students right there. Additionally, students did some work in whiteboards online, and they could save their work as a URL. In CalcPlat 3D, which is an online graphing calculator that we use in multivariable calculus, students can save their work as a URL, and so I could ask the students to produce a graph, and although that feature is not possible in WebWork to actually create a graph, they could create the graph in CalcPlat 3D and then put that URL in an essay box where I could grade manually later on. Additionally, and this came out to be very useful for the final exam, I had students use Flipgrid, which allowed the students to create videos of their work. And so here's a screenshot of a student who has written out some work and is going step by step through this and explaining his thought process and his solution. So the students create these videos in Flipgrid. I could go to Flipgrid and grade it, but if I had the student copy and paste the URL here, I had a couple of advantages. The students didn't have to make those public. And the second advantage is that I could give all the feedback in the same place here. The students didn't have to go to several different platforms to get their feedback and assessment. I mentioned that we use CalcPlat 3D in the class, and we had these lab assignments on ground where I helped and guided the students through an exploratory discovery-based lab using CalcPlat 3D. What I was able to do was use the iframe embedding feature in WebWork problems to embed not only videos that introduce the lab assignments to help the students out with them, but also links to dynamic figures where students could, right within WebWork, work with their CalcPlat 3D graph. And here's an example where a student could use a scroll bar here to manipulate the graph. And then they could answer questions that were set up using the scaffolded feature of WebWork. And the scaffolded feature allowed you to break a problem up into parts, and you can assign the students to view all of those parts at once, or you could have it set up where a student couldn't proceed to the next part until he's answered the previous. And the nice thing about this is it also works with essay prompts. Finally, I needed to come up with some solution to replace the pen and paper timed exams that I've been giving for years. And so I was able to do this in 3 different ways. The first was to provide students a randomized problem in WebWork, then ask them to create a Flipgrid video solving that problem to submit in a URL essay box in WebWork. The other type of questions were traditional exam questions in WebWork, where you use the gateway exam feature with some pooled problems, and the students could choose the time in which they would like to take that exam during a preset window. And finally, I added more essay questions to the exams in an open-ended format, and I have a link here to Francis Sue's 7 exam questions for a pandemic, which really inspired me to create new problems for the students that they couldn't Google. Going forward, there are a lot of things that could be improved about WebWork to make this class even more smooth, but This, web work is open source and relies on volunteers, so I'm not expecting much. But one thing that I can contribute is to come up with a better interface so that the CalcPlot 3D problems can be algorithmically graded in web work. So if a student is in CalcPlot 3D and produces a graph, they could somehow take that graph and have it checked within web work. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to contact me by email. Thank you very much for your time.
Right, so thank you, Monica, for that talk. We have one question so far over on Moodle. I have to remember to unmute you. I'll get better at this by the end of the conference. I'll be brilliant at it. There we go. So Debbie Euster asks, are the CalcPlot 3D labs available in the WebWork OPL database?
They're not yet, but I'd be happy to share them privately. Send an email, and I'm hoping to get them up into the OPL. I was actually hoping to get the interface so that the CalcPlot 3D problem could be graded automatically, but I think I might be putting up there this fall prematurely, where they would just be graded by the instructor manually, but yeah.
Okay. So how do you imagine the automatic grading would work for those?
There is a feature for the automatic grading. I think it's in GeoGebra, is that? And with web work. And so using some sort of communication that is based off of that would probably work within CalcPlot 3D as well. But I'm working with the developer of CalcPlot 3D to see if this is possible, and if he's still interested in making this a feature.
Lovely. No more questions forthcoming, it seems. So we might just move on unless something appears. If you come up with a question before the end of the session, I'm sure we can come back to Monica. Right, so thank you, Monica. And now we'll move on to our third and final talk of this session, which is a team from CUNY. Just heard a little bit of that there. A little bit of CUNY talking about their content development in web work.
Hi everyone, welcome to our talk. This is the CUNY WebWork OER Content Development Lightning Talk, and we're so pleased that you can be here with us. I'm Mariana Bonanome. I'm one of the faculty with the Math Department at City Tech, which is one of the CUNY colleges. We're located in downtown Brooklyn.
Hey, I'm Andrew Parker. I'm also at City Tech in the Math Department. So let's talk about web work at CUNY. Web work was a perfect solution for CUNY in that we were able to offer web work to our students at zero cost. That's a big concern at City Tech as well as at the other CUNY campuses. The web work content is really open and customizable. I spent a long time learning how to write problems and training other faculty to do the same, develop custom content for our campus as well as other CUNY campuses. I really liked the community aspect of web work. I got a lot of support from the forums and you know, attending conferences and meeting a lot of people. It's just a great community. Very invested in supporting everyone who uses web work. There's a library of thousands and thousands of problems that are already there, ready to use. And finally, I like the aspect of web work that allowed me to retain my students' data. Everything on all of the attempts, every interaction that students had with the web work platform gets recorded. And I've had some interesting results come out of analyzing student performance data in web work.
And so Professor Parker and I are co-directors on a grant. So it's a Title V Department of Education grant, And this is a collaborative grant with another CUNY campus, Borough of Manhattan Community College. They're located in downtown Manhattan. And so we're coming to the end of this 5-year grant, but along the way, we learned a lot of valuable lessons. That when we work with the WebWork content for our students, it's really important to curate this content and to polish it and to work together to, work on the language and make a really good user experience for our students. And, we want to make sure that the content is aligned with our course outlines. All of these details are really important and really increase the student engagement. Also, the support for the faculty working on this content is also really important. Having release time, having, summer salary, having training and professional development surrounding all of this work is super important in order to get buy-in from the faculty and really have the faculty own the material that they're working on. Creating turnkey courses is also really important. This really allowed us to drive a significant growth of adoption in our math department. Having courses ready to go, especially for our part-time faculty coming on board, this really does smooth the way and make a really great experience for them, along with the training. And then, we had some key infrastructure improvements that we worked on, and they really made a difference. So MathQuill, for instance, which helps students input their solutions, this really did reduce the frustration on the students' end when engaging with the platform. We also had a Q&A site that we enabled that also really went a long way to helping students engage with the platform. And so because of all of this, we were able to see that when we started the grant in 2016, we had about 35 sections in our math department using WebWork. And now we're at about almost 4,000 students, more over 100 sections. And so this is an enormous growth rate. All of these factors contributed. Regarding support, so as I mentioned, we're in a 5-year grant and we're coming towards the end of it. This semester will be coming up, will be our last extension semester, and we just wanted to see what this looks like moving forward. And so we wanted to loop in more campuses. And so we were able to get funding from the CUNY Central Office, and that funding for open educational resources allowed our faculty to continue building content and to share content across campuses, pull together our resources, reduce the redundancy, no need to reinvent the wheel on a campus-by-campus basis. And so as you can see, we have all of these college campuses within the CUNY system looped in with faculty representatives. Also, we plan on moving forward to put in a request for a larger amount to continue our efforts. And we've also been approached by Rice University. We joined them in an NSF proposal as collaborators to really look at the data that Professor Parker was talking about. We could use methods from AI to gain really valuable insights moving forward. And so...
Yeah, so moving forward, these are some of the things that we see in terms of growing the WebWork community, both at CUNY and beyond. One is continuing this effort to align content and curricula to open textbooks, for instance. One major concern is consistency in language and student expectation for student responses, things to reduce student frustration when engaging with online assessment. This needs to continue and it needs to expand, right? So across CUNY, we're interested in getting all campuses, as many campuses as possible, to participate in the development of this content. We want to make sure everybody's voice is heard and that what we're creating is something that can serve all campuses. We want to expand our community and partnerships. We'd like to begin looking beyond CUNY and start saying, okay, let's share what we've got. We can use that as a model in other college systems or just one-off campuses collaborating with each other. Anything to reduce the workload on individual faculties. It's a lot to align an entire course. But when you collaborate with other campuses, you get a product that is useful is useful to more students in the long run and is less work for everyone involved. Third, we've got a research program. The development of a research program looking at data coming out of the WebWorks system would be huge. Like I said, I've begun looking at some of this data. I know I'm not the only one, but looking at the impact that this content has on student learning outcomes, from campus to campus, what consistent lessons can we learn from this content? What are the implications? I just think that there's a lot that could be done here through a collaborative effort to look at student performance data from WebWork. And number 4, for CUNY, having a centralized installation would greatly facilitate the analysis of that data across campuses. Right now, WebWork is a do-it-yourself installation process at each campus, and that introduces its own technological hurdles and also human, time and effort expenses in maintaining separate installations at each campus. Centralizing installation would be a great advantage for City Tech and CUNY at large. And finally, technological infrastructure, developing these kinds of ease of use, quality of life improvements for a platform that reduce frustrations with the platform itself and help students to focus on the math content without being frustrated by how to type in their answers or the other aspects of interacting with the problem. We'd like them to struggle with the math content and learn from that rather than struggling with the platform itself.
And so here's some available content. So we've been talking about all the great work we've been collaborating on. So if you would like to see more about what we're working on, we have a website here. Please feel free to visit. And these are the courses that are either in progress or ready to share. So please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we really
everybody.
appreciate you listening to us, and we hope you're safe and be well. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, great. So while I unmute Mariana, you can be, and Andrew, you can be thinking of questions for them. Oh, the things keep switching around on Zoom. Right. So it looks like no questions on Moodle, so I'm going to have to come up with some again. So one thing that wasn't clear to me is, because I'm not hugely familiar with the American system, that your colleges, your sort of the transition between high school and higher stage universities, is that right?
So in the CUNY system, we have about 275,000 students across 24 campuses. And we're really unique. We say we're kind of like a microcosm, where we have community colleges, which are 2-year institutions, which are associate degree programs. And then we also have senior colleges, which are 4-year bachelor's institutions. But then we also have graduate level institutions. Actually, I myself am a graduate of the CUNY Graduate Center. I got my doctorate there. So we really run the gamut of, so you can see the entire pipeline coming out of high school. You can do a 2-year, 4-year, and higher, higher degree programs. So it's really interesting to study. If we get together and kind of look at the data on our students, we have a lot of pipelines and articulation agreements. So we have, some students do a 2-year program at one CUNY campus and then continue their 4-year degree at another campus, and then maybe go on to do graduate work. So the option of possibly tracking them throughout their educational career is really amazing. Then we can really gain some valuable insights there. So that's kind of the structure of the system that we're in. And we're in New York, and many of us are, very local, 15-minute subway ride from campus to campus. So that, enables these collaborative efforts, really easily.
Great, thanks. And so just to get an idea of the content that you developed, that looks like something that would be in a service course here for maybe someone not heading for a pure maths degree. Is that right?
Yeah, there's at least at City Tech, we really don't have a lot of students in the pure math track. We have loads of students in other STEM disciplines, particularly computer science. We are a service department for by and large. And so, yeah, our major focus has been on these pipeline courses, places where students get stuck, you know, where the point is retention and understanding those who don't succeed, why they don't succeed, those who leave, why they leave. And so we can address their concerns and hopefully make it better for future iterations.
Great. Yeah, it seems like a very well-trodden path. That particular stage seems to be really well suited to e-assessment.
Yes.
I can see that around the world. We have a question from James Fody asking about the popularity of web work in the USA. He says, is this connected to best practices and the college structure, or just because it's from the USA? And did you try any European systems?
Well, okay, so I'm partial to web work in that I've been using it for about 10 years, and web work was one of the early entrants into this scene, and so I kind of got looped into that, and I got invested in the community and kind of championing that. I will say I was really impressed looking at numbers. I'd never heard of it before being introduced to this conference, and so I think there's certainly some communication issues that could be improved between our between our regions. But web work in terms of popularity, I will say we really improved student preference for web work by doing this alignment effort. Because the library has been built up for so long by so many authors, there's a lot of voices and there's a lot of variation in expectations for how students interact with web work. And so one of the major things that we try to prioritize is to smooth out those inconsistencies so that students aren't jerked around from problem to problem with the various expectations of the various authors who aren't actually the ones running their course right at the moment. So that's a big part of what we see as improving the platform, the student experience of web work, and it has made a huge difference. Our numbers show that students went from roughly 1/3 preferring web work over paper and pencil homework to like 2/3 preferring web work over pencil paper homework, just by making some of these changes to consistently expect, you know, a certain rounding accuracy or you know, ways in which they input their functions. Things like adding the math quill feature made huge impacts on students' preference for the platform, because they stopped struggling with how do I type my answer, and they start struggling with, okay, when I know that I typed in what I thought was the answer, and now that I'm being told that that's wrong, I can actually believe it because I'm not suspicious of the process.
Yeah, that's a really valuable point, I think, and something that maybe we don't talk about while we're showing off the whizzy things we've done. That all this kind of stuff about student experience is really important.
Yeah, it's also just the investment of our team is focused on doing those kinds of things. It's really that's where the real effort lies at the moment.
That's really good. I have a question from Ingo Dan asking, how do you encourage communication between the campuses? I guess this is linked.
It's money. Money makes a big difference, and that's part of what Mariana and I have said. You know, once we got grant funding behind doing some of this alignment effort, people started coming out of the woodwork. You know, people are interested in doing this work, but it's New York City. We all have a fairly high teaching load at the different campuses. The expectation on teaching combined with the expectation on research, you know, already makes for a heavy docket of work to be done. And so like at least having some support, you know, when there's grant money involved and you can release instructors from other obligations so that they can focus on this work, makes a huge difference in people being willing to contribute.
Yeah.
And if I could also chime in, so what happens is, you know, at first we had, you know, faculty saying, I don't need a second job. And basically they were feeling like administering, you know, being the one responsible for the WebWork installation and creating courses and training faculty. This was kind of a heavy burden. But once we reached out to the different campuses to say, we hear your voice, we're in the same spot. How do we, you know, smooth our efforts and work together so we can support each other and create a community around this and demand more from the central office to say, look, this is redundant effort and this is effort that is having, you know, the impact on our students of saving hundreds of thousands of dollars of their dollars, keeping the courses zero cost, aligned with zero cost textbooks. You know, we need to be acknowledged. And so I think that now, you know, we started with a little bit of funding, which is a huge inroads into acknowledging the effort. And now that we have, you know, people funded and we're rolling with the funding, we have now people jumping on board without funding. I can't even keep track of everyone. We're up to 13 people. And now our Zoom meetings are getting so big, I can't keep track of all the teams, but this is a good problem to have. So now we're kind of rolling out and, you know, our early members are taking over as leaders and leading their own teams and doing higher level courses like linear algebra and differential equations and possibly going into other, you know, fields like pharmaceuticals and, you know, actuarial programs and these kinds of things. So it's super exciting. A little bit of an investment and recognition in faculty goes a long way, long way.
Yeah, I can certainly agree with that. I think a large part of the success of the e-learning team at Newcastle has been paying my salary for 10 years, that then we can grow that across the university and have a central point. And maybe that's something we're missing in the UK, this collaboration between institutions. We don't have quite the same setup as CUNY does. Okay, one last question from Chris Sanguine. He says, my experience is that large question banks become very hard to manage. How do you manage your materials? Oh, that chuckle is telling.
That's the first round of work that has to happen as we do this collaborative effort across the CUNY campuses. Our early participants are all faculty who've been using WebWork for the various courses. And so we are pulling large groups of problems together, and then we start sorting through them for, okay, what's redundant, what's replicated, what's the best version of this kind of question? Do we want to keep that? So yeah, you're not wrong, and I don't really have a good answer other than we just dig through the haystack and you know, take out what we want. That's also part of, I guess, that's also part of the idea behind us making these turnkey courses for CUNY, so that, because that is so much work, it's gotten, you know, it's difficult to find what you want. There's just so many options that having something that's already consistent, and you don't have to worry about, you know, what we're aiming for is providing many more problems and much more content than what you want, because you can always trim it down without losing that alignment. But it's hard to build something back up and fill in gaps without, again, losing that alignment.
Right. Chris just signaled that he wanted to answer.
If I can comment, yeah, my experience of this is that individual problems are the wrong unit of exchange, and that coherent problem sheets are a better kind of unit.
Yep, absolutely. So one of the things we're thinking about is sharing out topics. Like you're saying, like a topic sheet, like a worksheet, a coherent collection of problems that are all consistent with each other and have a scaffolded, you know, sequencing.
Yeah. And Michael Gage has just commented that they had NSF support for a board that moved questions from contributors, I guess is this sort of unmoderated area into the open problem library. and making sure that problems were properly tagged. And this is a problem we have in numbers as well.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that turns up. Okay, so I think, unless anybody has put any more questions in there, I mean, I could keep asking you questions about infrastructure and stuff for quite a while, but we're drawing towards the end. So I think we've had 3 really good talks here. I personally haven't learned much from Anne's talk because I've been in constant communication with her for months, but I hope everybody else did. Monica's stuff looked really good, and I'm going to be investigating Calclot 3D after this. And it was fascinating to hear the experiences of the team at CUNY. Okay, so I will show you the program for tomorrow because it's been changing. Let's do that. So tomorrow morning we have a presentation from Digital Ed, who create the Mobius system, and then straight after that George, Ian and Chris, who are organising a research working group on computer-aided assessment. I'm going to be making a short pitch about that. I think they're going to have a longer session on Monday. They really want to gather together people who are interested in doing some research into e-assessment. And then in the afternoon, we've got a series of updates from developers of e-assessment systems. We're going to have Chris talking about Stack first, then I'll be talking about numbers. And finally, Mike will talk about recent developments in web work. So that's tomorrow, and then we have 3 more days next week. And I think we'll end it there for today. So thank you all very much.